listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm joined with my friend Kate Cornelius, also known as the Queen of Solidity. She is a woman on a mission to help raise compassion worldwide by catalyzing radical soul-level transformation. Born into a spiritual upbringing, Kate rebelled against anything not in alignment with universal truth all throughout her childhood, immersing herself in any modality of knowledge and self-discovery that called her. Today, she has the privilege of serving her purpose with dignity and grace through her intuitive work. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming out. I'm so excited to have you here.
I am too. This is going to be fantastic.
Yes. Thank you for coming. Could you share a bit about yourself and your spiritual journey with us?
Yeah. So I was actually raised in spirituality and personal sovereignty. You know, my parents did a really great job of asking us to kind of always center back into self and allowing us to be who we are. They were very stern in their boundaries, right? They were very secure in this sense of self. And as a kid, I hated it. I was so jealous and I was so envious of, I don't want to say it was like perfect, right? But when you know that somebody is 100% authentically who they are, and you also realize that, like, I guess at the time, maybe you're not at that place. And I think we all kind of have that even when we're young little kids, you know. I was so angry about it all the time. And I found astrology when I was 10. Everyone told me that I was crazy. And, it's weird. They're just generalized horoscopes. And I loved everything about it, you know. And my mom was really great. She used to have like her own pack of tarot cards. And she would never read them. She would just shuffle them and like lay a few out and then pick them up and shuffle them again. And I was like, I don't understand what you're doing. Like, I didn't understand the concept because we didn't go to church. We didn't actually go to like outside communities or anything. It was just them, you know? And so then when I found astrology, I was like, okay, this is kind of about me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a Leo. So if you guys can just give me all of the things about me, that would be perfect. And then I kind of pushed off spirituality after that. I was kind of still angry about not getting it, not getting the things that I wanted, not having the experiences that I wanted, kind of wondering why I was gifted this little perspective, this concentrated perspective that we have, right? And then I had an ascension at 23. I mean, I had gone through all of these experiences, all of these things in life, and at 23, I was getting divorced because I was so angry and like pushing things off and like not just teenage rebellion, but like right. I'm cutting everybody off and I'm going to go do this thing that's mine. And then I got payback for it, basically. You know, I got to go get divorced. I got to go run back home with my tail between my legs. And I got to spend a lot of time now in this ascension, which ended up being a 12-year cycle of suffering, right? And I didn't know that it was an ascension. And that was really the key because I had pushed everything off that I didn't even take it to other people. So I allowed myself to go through that hardship for a really long time. And so many things came up because of it, you know? And as those things were happening and as there's this recalibration back into self, but it was almost like a recalibration into losing yourself more than it was into, hey, like, this is me, right? It's like I did everything backwards. It's the story of my entire life. And the whole journey, I mean, when I look back on it now, from this point that I'm at, I look at it and I'm like, wow, there are so many pieces that I'm like, that was horrible. That I would not want to do that again.
Right.
Like, why did I sign up for that part of the roller coaster? You know? And I'm still so incredibly thankful for getting to this point and getting to experience these things. And now looking back, watch how they kind of came together And it helps to release a lot of things almost, to look back and be like, okay, that happened, and I can see now that this is the part that benefited from it, right? This is where that ripple lands and connects to something else. And above and beyond anything else, like I am thankful for that part of a spiritual journey, because most of it's not fun, and most of it is, it's hard work to get in and to really come back to who you are after you have all this conditioning and like you live all these lives. It's not easy, and I'm super proud of myself for doing it, and I'm super proud of everyone else who's ever done it and will continue to do it, because there's nothing greater than getting to come back to who you are and then recognize yourself for that.
Right.
Sounds
like the hero's journey, you know. If it's a straight pleasant line, I don't know if you fully went into the underworld yet. So we have to go deep into ourselves to get the elixir, right, that we bring back up. And I just think that's the most important part of the journey. And you have to prepare, and then you go under. But I think, like you said, I didn't realize I was ascending, you know. And I've talked to some people, and they're at a really bad point. And I'm not trying to like be like, you know, you should just relax because this is all going to end, you know. But I'm like looking at them. I'm like, wow, they're in the underworld right now. But I can't tell them that.
Right.
So I try to focus on like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because there is, you know. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't suck when you're down there.
Absolutely. You know, it kind of reminds me of like when you watch those time traveler shows and they're like, okay, you can't go and tell anyone anything about this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, right. Because you can't alter that journey. So you just have to sort of hold space, you know, for the people that, because you've been there now.
Right.
So then you're like, okay, I remember where I was at, you know, at 23. It's funny that you said, because that's about the time I really got into Kundalini yoga, and then I got pregnant with my son, and then everything changed. But it was around 23. Yeah. So I'm like,
it's exactly, I mean, I don't know if everyone goes through it where they hit 23 and it's like, okay, now we have to ascend. But I've seen a few people who have had it in that trajectory, and I was like, okay, that's when I started at that 12-year cycle point, right? And so I've gone back and I've looked at so many pieces of that, and I was like, okay, that was terrible. And for a long time when I first started it, I didn't look at me in it. I looked at, okay, this is external, and how am I relating to that? Right? Because I was raised spiritually, coming from this background of like pure universal love and energy, and knowing that all of us are connected in that way, and all of us are, we're following these set of guidelines, so to speak, right? And then learning astrology and being like, oh, okay, cool. That energy is just a concentrated view.
Right.
I still wasn't understanding that there was this internal part. Like I knew that it was there, but I didn't understand, I guess. Like I was conscious, but unconscious at the same time.
Right.
Childish. I would call it the same level as kids. I know you have kids. I have kids. I have a 15-year-old actually, and we keep coming back to these cycles where we're looking at it, and I'm like, okay, I remember being 15. Like I remember having to face these things. I remember having all of these experiences, and very same way as I can't tell you you're in this dark place, like you can't tell a teenager anything either.
Right. You just have to
you just kind of have to go through it. And so like I look back at all of these parts of this journey that I've been on, and there are pieces that were still missing, like almost like they hadn't been introduced. Right? And so I really decided, I mean, there were things that happened, and I mean, you were even part of one where when we were serving, you know, I had divorce, I had bankruptcy, I had infancy loss, I had having to be called out of jobs and not be able to go and work anymore because of our youngest son. I mean, there were so many things, right, that piled up. And when you don't realize you're ascending, a lot of that looks like, well, I just have bad luck.
Right.
Right? It's not, oh, I'm dropping these layers of things that are not really me, of conditioning that I've allowed myself to have, or thoughts that I've allowed myself to have. And when you're not recognizing that, it's so much harder to break through those barriers as you're going.
Right.
Because you can't tell the difference between that external and internal.
There was something I learned recently when reading a Vedic astrology book, which I don't usually practice Vedic, but I still benefit from the myths and things like that. And it explains so much because, you know, we talk about the Saturn return a lot, but in Vedic, Saturn return still, it's not that it's not intense, but they have this thing, and I might be saying it wrong because I've never actually heard anyone else say it. I just read it. It's Sate, or Sati maybe. And this is when Saturn goes over your moon. And this is a 7.5 year period where basically you just have to like buckle up because you're going to be misinterpreted. You're going to have troubles, tribulations, and just reading the myth of Saturn is one of the things that they call an apana, which can actually help you because you can recognize that you're in it.
Right.
And this is where things like human design and astrology really help us because we can look ahead.
Right.
But see, in my natal chart, Saturn and the moon are naturally conjunct. So when I had my Saturn return, I also experienced that Sate at the same time. So I thought I was like literally dying. I'm like, no, like I got like my whole family has been estranged. My dad died. Like all this stuff was happening. And I was like, there's nothing I can do. Like I was just completely, I felt like a victim at that point, you know, and I'm just now, because it's a 7.5 year cycle, coming to the end of it. And I'm like, and my husband's still like in the middle of it. So there's times where I'm like, I'm so sorry but they're probably not listening to you. Like it's not you. It's like, it's Saturn.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I just really think looking at the cycles can help us understand, and whether that's looking forward or backwards. So we're like, oh, okay, that's why, I did the bankruptcy thing, and like lost things. And,
that's one of the core principles in what I'm doing in my business. Like, one of the beliefs that I have that I always tell people is our core pattern is our core pattern.
Right.
It's that concentration. It's what we've already been gifted. It's what we're coming with, and we know, right? And because we know it, in the very same way that when you know your family, you're just nastier to them than you are to everyone else. I mean, you're going to have a nastier interpretation that you kind of have to break away from. And so the more that I think all of us understand that, and we understand that, hey, there are these layers that are coming in, and not only did we choose it, but if we have enough people who understand, or if we have enough resources that can come to us, well, we don't have to suffer in that kind of way.
Right.
And that's all any of us wants. None of us want to feel pained. We all want to feel this joy and happiness. And it just comes down to not knowing.
Right.
Like just not knowing that the resource is there. And that blows my mind.
Yes. I love that. I know you work with like law of attraction and manifesting quite a bit. Could you explain what that is for those who haven't heard of it and how they can work with that energy?
Yeah. I've been certified in the law of attraction for, oh my gosh, I guess going on 3 or 4 years now. And the law of attraction, I've heard a lot of people describe it as this set of rules, right? And these rules are basically just used for you to think positively, and poof, you're going to get everything you want just dropped into your lap, right? And yes, in half truth, I suppose, it really is rules, but more like guidelines, right? And yes, in fact, half true, they can in fact manifest for you. But I like to look at these as a bundle of truths. Right? Not necessarily guidelines, just truth. And I think that truth just sounds different when it hits you. Right? And all of these truths apply to any and all things in all of the universe, including me and you and that little blade of grass outside. And these truths, once we're weaving these together, they are forming this integral structure of the circle of life. Right? And when we're having this circle of life, that's what's helping us decondition. These are external experiences that are being gifted to us so that we can observe. There is, in fact, another opportunity. Don't have to use it if you don't want to, but it is there. It's going to be there whether you want it to be or not. Just like the other side of the coin is always there. Right? And when we're deconditioning our realities, then the only other thing that's left to be produced is our greatest version of reality, our grand vision. Right? It's what I tend to call it, this grand vision. And the thing that people don't recognize, I hear so many people talk negatively about this concept of manifestation. Oh, it's toxic positivity or, just anything to kind of demean this. And what people don't realize is that we're always manifesting.
Right.
Always. whether you want to or not.
Mm-hmm.
Every thought that we're having is leading to a feeling that we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And those feelings, right, are causing this chemical response that is leading us to take an action. Whether you're going to call your friend and you're going to complain about that guy at work, or you're going to go to the grocery store when really you're too tired and you didn't want to, all of these things are leading to that reality that we're going to have tomorrow. And guess what? When you don't fill up your car tonight and you really needed to, inevitably that's when you're late to work the next day, right? All because you had to stop for a tank of gas. And it's just this very simple concept of, if I know that everything works like this, I know that spring is going to come at the spring equinox. Mm-hmm. Always.
My birthday.
There is no stopping it.
Right.
Right? It's funny because my kids were talking about the groundhog and they were like, 6 more weeks of winter. And I was like, it's 6 more weeks till spring either way.
Right. How are you going to view it?
You know? It was just 70 the other day.
Right.
That's pretty spring to me. I don't know about you guys. So if that's true, and we're always bringing this stuff into us, and we're always gifting ourselves these experiences, we have that choice. Always. This free will and this choice to say, I think I'd rather find the silver lining in this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I'd rather not feel bad today. So I'm just not going to circle that thought.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that mean it's always easy? No.
Right.
Ease and flow doesn't mean easy. Effortless doesn't mean actionless. It can't. It can't. And so these laws or rules or guidelines, that's so negative to kind of put that connotation, right? But when you say, hey, this is a bundle of truths, I can choose to see it however I want. It doesn't change the fact that it's true.
Right.
Right? And if that's the case, then I have this free will to make this choice. And you see, the law of attraction, being able to use these in practice is more about our ability to tackle growth and the deconditioning just in bite-sized pieces. And we see law of attraction played out in so many arenas. They have it in rehab facilities for the 12 steps. There are certain parts that are in scripture that people use for all kinds of sorts, religious practices or marriage counseling. We see it inside of therapy. You know, there are so many mental practices that are just telling you, if you just stop for a minute, if you just practice being mindful and bring yourself right here in this moment, this is your reality. This becomes your heaven or hell. It's not about what's on the other side, because once you're there, all of the rest of it doesn't matter. You already know where you're coming from, but can you make this what you're desiring it to be?
Right. Right. I feel like when we pull ourselves into the present, we can kind of turn off the mind for a second, because so much of what we're ruminating on isn't actually important in that present moment. So if we could just ground and center and clear our mind, then we're actually fine. Because so much of it is just in our heads, you know, and then it's keeping, then that affects our emotions and then our feelings. And then it's like our whole aura is now full of all this junk.
Yeah.
But you can clear it out just as quickly as you brought up the thoughts in. And I think this is where all these tools really help, like having affirmations or mantras or whatever. I do some certain mantras, and one is literally just to clear everything out, and others to bring in guides, you know, and others to center and remember who I am. And those really help me, you know, and, but like you can use whichever thing that works for you, which is so cool, you know?
And I mean, think about it for a minute. When you're at work and you know that you have your electric bill, we've all been, I mean, I was a server. Right? We all know what it is to not have that last $5 that you really need.
Right.
When you're in that place and your bill is due on Friday and you are so angry and you are so hostile at your experience that's occurring, right? And you really want to go to that customer or that manager or that person and walk out. I'm leaving. I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. And you know that if you do, right? If you don't stop in that moment and you don't practice that mindfulness of being like, I cannot punch somebody today. I can't go to jail today. Like, I got to go pay that utility bill. You're still practicing those very same truths.
Right.
Right? Because that is what they are. And you just aren't recognizing it as, I really caught myself.
Right.
Good job, Kate. Like, you didn't kill somebody today.
Right, right.
You know? And we don't give ourselves enough credit for that. In any capacity.
Yeah, I read the Abraham Hicks. I think is it The Secret or something, when I was around the time I was waiting tables.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was such a great time to read it because it's like to really practice it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like to really set intentions before my shift. And then just because I got a shitty tip, I wasn't going to just sit there and be like, well, now everyone's going to, because I totally did that in the past. But I would actually practice it and like to try to, okay, something might upset me, just breathe through it and then focus on something else. And then something different would come into my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I might not make $1 million that day, but I made enough, right?
Right.
Like just enough. And so I don't know. Eventually I started trusting the universe more, and just letting it guide me and realizing, okay, I might have just made $30 today, but the next day I made like 100. So,
Right.
It's constantly evolving, but there was a point where I noticed people would do the toxic positivity thing. And this kind of irritated me, not because I do understand that when you're suffering, someone just sitting there and encouraging you is not always what you need.
Right.
And I get that. Like we need to be with people that are grieving and going through things and not just sit there and be like, well, you'll get over it. But I don't think focusing on, oh, this is toxic positivity is good either, because the only way out is positivity. At some point, once you've grieved and given that time, how are you going to get out of that hole that you've dug?
Yeah, there's a very fine line, right? I used to be someone, and I mean, maybe you recognized it when we worked together, but life for me used to be very black and white. I'm super analytical. A lot of my skills are very analytical and tangible and like concrete, right? I work a lot with like patterning and helping people do marketing and like things that are accounting. I had an accounting firm, right?
Okay.
Totally different than even these types of conversations. And so like having all of these really strong analytical qualities, for me, it makes sense that people come in at these different levels, right? There's a hierarchy that comes to your ascension, that comes to your spirituality. And so as I started to go through that journey, I was like, oh, yeah, gray area. Like I hated gray area because it makes you almost have to be decisive, right? You think you're decisive when it's just black and white, but really you're leaving out a whole bunch of options, And so you find that gray area, and it's such a thin line between someone who has surrendered just enough that they're not positive. They're just choosing not to focus on the negative. That's not to say they didn't see it.
Right.
And it's not to say they didn't have the thought.
Right.
They just didn't have to say it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's why we can't tell the difference, because these people who are in this toxic positivity, we've been force fed. Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it. You have to be successful. You got to get through school. You got to get into that college, right? I don't care if it hurts. I don't care if you die. You're going to pick yourself up and go. And so we don't think about what that actually means, to look at something and to say, all right, I see it for what it is. I see it for where I'm at, and I see it for where I want it to be. And really, that's where the positivity comes in. That's that gray area, because we can make a choice at any point and know that we've hurt someone's feelings. We can know that we've done everything humanly possible to make it okay, and we've still done something harmful to somebody else. And at the end of the day, I just call that conscious courtesy, right? If people who have reached this certain point have a level of conscious courtesy that comes in that allows them to be positive in the truthful way versus the toxic positivity way of like, okay, well, you're just going to have to suck it up. You're not allowed to cry and feel bad. Right? And I think it's really refreshing to know that if you guys are in that toxic positivity state, one, it's not wrong. It is, in fact, part of that ascension process. We've all been there. We've all done it. Like, we've all been dirtbags for a minute, and we were like, suck it up. Some of us, more empathetic than some of us like me, right? So you got there a lot quicker than I did, but I still got there.
Right.
And so if you're in that place, you're still going to grow out of it.
Right.
And you are going to get to this point where you're like, I've seen both sides of that coin. Sorry that hurt your feelings. Like, we can't have this anymore. We can't have that relationship anymore. And you start to see that there's more variations, right? There's hardship for you. There's hardship for others. And it really comes down to, I'm looking to make this thing, this life, this version for me go as right as possible with the least amount of harm. And the least amount of harm here means for you and for me.
Right.
Right? And that becomes that level of positivity where I'm doing both of us a service by saying this thing to you, by feeling this thing, by creating this action. And I'm giving us this return, this result that we're both needing because I care. Not because I want you to feel something different.
Right.
You know?
Right. This is kind of bringing up something that it's kind of been life-changing for me, actually, that I've recently stumbled on. And I think it's helping me be more positive. But it's this forgiveness prayer that the Akashic Records have shared. And it helps me think more positively about things that have happened to me, but also like when someone's pissed me off or if I've hurt them. So the prayer is like, if so-and-so has done anything knowingly or unknowingly to hurt me, I forgive and release it. And then it goes, if I have done anything to so-and-so knowingly, and then it's, if I have done it like at all, like collectively. And like, there's something about this forgiveness that just, it like lifts everything and it allows me to see the positive things, because like it's like that bitterness and the resentment, these things, and you might not even realize that you have that much bitterness about something. But I really think forgiveness is one of the keys for me that I found to help me stay in that more positive frame of mind. And so like I'm saying this prayer all the time now. Like if I notice somebody's like really bothering me, I might, especially if they do something to hurt me, but they're like unconscious of it.
Right.
I'm like, forgiveness, gonna have to forgive them, move on. But it's just helping me not cling to those negative thoughts about a situation or a person or whatever. So I just had to share that because it's like a life hack I've just experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same for me. I don't know that I look at it in terms of forgiveness, right? The word that I use for that is surrender. And that's mostly because everything about me, and I'm sure, I know you've seen my chart, and I know everyone who sees it's like, yeah, I'm going to say this and you're going to be like, yeah. Everything for me is a matter of control, right? Like I'm white knuckling life almost, and I can recognize it now. And just to be able to say those words, I can recognize it now.
Right.
That's huge. That's huge. And being able to do that, whether it's because I started in spirituality or it's because I decided to learn astrology, the ability to surrender, this ability to recognize and then be like, that's really not what I want, is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying to go through. And at the same time, I heard this woman say a few weeks ago, literally, and this is the moment that it dawned on me. Like, I knew that I had a control thing, and I knew that I'm super stubborn. Like, I know the things about myself. I've read my chart numerous times. But this woman, literally, the other day, we were in a collective masterminding membership type of thing. And she was talking about making a beautiful connection. It wasn't even close to this topic of conversation, right? But she was like, I had this moment where she was like, oh, I had to go through it to get to it. And I was like, oh, it clicked into place for me, right? And I saw it kind of like when someone goes into the underworld and they're dropping through the water and you're like, I was supposed to be in water and now I'm out on the other side of this surface, right? And it made total sense to me. And I was like, that's what surrender feels like. That's what forgiveness feels like, right? Is that going through that motion to come out on this other side and be like, oh, I'm not going to drown like I thought I was going to drown. I'm just coming into this new reality.
Right.
Game changer.
Yeah. Do you have any like manifesting advice or tips for people that they could hone in on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one thing that everyone needs to do is breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe. That's the number one thing that's creating resistance in our lives from being able to get these things that we want, because we're not able to be decisive and we're not able to be honest. When we're in these modes, stress modes, or we're in overwhelm, or life just continues to kick us in the teeth, the very first thing we do is hit that fight, fright, or flee, right? And we stop breathing.
Right.
And we have to be able to have this oxygen in our system, feeding our brain, telling us somatically, whether you're calming your vagus nerve or you're having to do EFT tapping or you're just pausing to find that. Mel Robbins made herself famous by practicing the pause and counting backwards from 5. Like, this is super important for everyone to realize. Okay? We have to have this information in order to be able to stop to see an opportunity as different. So the very first thing you have to do if you want manifestation to be successful is you have to be able to cultivate that awareness. And in order to do that, you have to breathe. And then the other thing that I want to say about that, I use a 4-6-4 method. There are so many different ways that people can just take a deep breath, right? There are actually breathing coaches and not just for like vocalists, right?
Right.
They actually do retreats and like it's insane what people bring into this space. Like I love the nuance and the focus that everyone has. But I do a 4-count inhale, a 6-count exhale, and then I hold it for 4 seconds. And I do that as many times as I need to. I bring myself back in as many times as I need to. And I ask myself the questions that I would hope someone would ask me if I needed it, right? I befriend myself. I care about me. I live with me and die with me. I'm going to be the last one there who watches my entire life reel, wishing I did something or brushing off any regrets that I may have had, saying my last little goodbyes. It's me. And I have to love me for all of these pieces. And the other tip that I would say, kind of like in astrology, if you know your top 3, right? You're pretty much at 70% of the game here. You can get through pretty easy in life. I think if you pair breathing, true intentional breathing, really deep down into your belly, and you pair it with grounding, first of all, and gratitude. Real G's do not move in silence. They just move. That's the truth of it. And when you're manifesting, it's all so important to check in with you, to ask yourself those questions, right? To practice that moment of pause so you can gain that clarity and come back into it. And once you do that, you can find the gratitude. You can flip over that coin, right? You can cultivate that awareness by seeing more than just your viewpoint, which is how we're all stuck where we're at anyway. And you can take that information and now you can make a better decision.
Right.
That's half of the game. Or like that's the 70%, 50%, 60. Wherever it kind of lands for you is where that lands. But that's a massive shift from where you were at, right?
Right.
That's massive. And the reason I think that those are important is because we have that universal law of one, right? Everything is connected. Everything is one. Everything is interwoven. And so because you already have these answers that are within you, you'll know when you're out of alignment. You'll know when things aren't working right because you're going to have that response. And it's going to feel chaotic. If it is chaos, if it is drama, if it is negativity, and I mean like true negativity, not just your friend complained once about a boyfriend, right? Or if you consider a lot of, I just have bad luck. Life's not going to go well for me. I just got that bad luck. Then you are out of alignment. Breathe, ground yourself back into this energy that's you. Go outside in the sunshine. Put your hand under some water, right? Go take as many showers in a day as you need to. Lotion if you guys get dry. But do what you have to do to get to that point. And then watch as your life changes. Because you don't deserve to live that way. I don't think any of us deserve to live in this downward spiral of the world's shitting on me. I don't deserve these things. I feel negative and bad all the time. I don't think we're meant to live like that.
Right. And it really, those people push people away because, over time, people are like, I'm like, every time I'm around that guy, I get super depressed and then like there's no changes. And then, so it actually pushes people away that might be able to help you shift your perspective. But because you're just sitting there, repeating, you're doing the mantras, but you're doing them the other way.
Right.
So with the Abraham Hicks book, it was like, it taught me to be mindful of like, when I say like negative things, that the universe doesn't like hear, like, I don't want to do this. It just here's to do this.
Right.
So it really like it took me like years to figure out how to rewire myself to focus on what I actually want.
Yeah.
And if I don't want something, I immediately am like, how can I word this in a way that's what I do want? But it forces you before you speak it out to sit there and think, okay, how can I say this without the negative thing?
I remember that from being a kid. You know, my mom used to tell us one thing at the house. She would say, and not trying to get us to change our mind, she'd be like, does that feel good? Does that feel good in here? And we would usually never answer, right? Mom reading, she'll just read your soul. And she's like, if it doesn't feel good, why are you doing it? And then she would just leave. Like, she wouldn't even finish a conversation. She'd just be like, you can think about it. And I don't know how it went for any of my other siblings. I don't know how my brother felt about it. Curiosity always got me, though. She got me with that, and I'm sure it's exactly what she meant to do. I'm sure it was me that she's trying to impact with these words. I was like, 100% certain.
Yeah.
But in the outside world, right? Like, she wouldn't ask us that if we were out and we were doing something and be like, oh, you get the look and stuff, you know?
Right.
But bringing that back in, she'd be out in this other world, and she'd almost have the same question for other people, you know? But she had it in the energy stance of, like, people wouldn't come around her and they wouldn't curse around her. And they wouldn't impose on these boundaries that she had. And, like, they were invisible boundaries. These people didn't know that she doesn't like those things, right? But she just was who she was. And it was like, do you feel good? It's like her aura was like, do you feel good doing that? No, I don't think you do.
Right.
And sometimes it felt judgy. For me anyway. And that was a lot of that resentment, right? Of like, damn, I wish I could do that.
Right.
I wish I could hold people to that standard.
Right.
You know?
I do think that whole, like, the Socratic method is a good way to teach people, because I do think just sitting with the question, now I have a question, I have to think about it, you know? And there is something about questions that is really powerful. Like with the records, if I don't have a question, I ain't getting anything.
Right.
You have to ask. So her just saying that and you asking yourself, well, you know, do I feel good? Now, because the question triggered you to have to think about it.
Yeah.
So I actually, I can see why that would be so impactful for you.
Yeah,
you know?
it definitely got me. And I didn't find out why it got me so much until I got into the human design, though.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. So let's get into some of that. What drew you to human design, and what have you found the most helpful with it?
I was not in search of human design. Like, I wasn't someone who it found me. It was the stray cat who found me. I always had that massive desire to know more, right? And as soon as I found astrology, I was like, ooh, this is cool. But it's not so much me as it is, this is just an overall energy, you know? Or at least that's how it felt. And every time I would read it, it's not like I got these massive aha moments where I was like, oh, you guys just read my diary, didn't you? Because I didn't feel that way with it. And I loved everything that it brought in. And then I ended up going to a sales program in 2021. I went to this little retreat. I was overweight. I was miserable. I was starting this business. I was transitioning actually out of my accounting firm, but I had started my business because I wanted something that was mine. Like, not mom, not spouse. I'm not anything other than just what I want to be. And it was hostile. Like, the energy that I started that with was really hostile, right? Kind of that wording that you were talking about. And when I went into this sales program, it was because I was at this point where I was like, this is not working. I am not getting the traction that I wanted. And this woman was just a really good salesman. Like, I didn't know I was in a sales program until I had already paid $8,000 to be in it, you know? And so I was like, okay, cool. Well, must be here for a reason. And there was a woman who was a part of her program, and she was kind of holding that energy of like a social seller, you know? And she was in this event that we were in, and I don't know if everyone else did, but you knew that she was kind of pushing you into this direction. You guys going to get into that program? Are you guys, like, how do you feel about that? And then she asked a question, like she made this little post inside of the group and she's like, do you guys know your human design? And everybody flooded on that post and they were like saying these things. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? What is this? And so I asked, I was like, no question's a dumb question. Hey, what is this? And she told me about it. She was like, hey, it's this personal system, and it uses, or it combines these 5 different modalities. And she was saying stuff, and I was like, oh, I know that one. And, oh, you said astrology. Like, I really know that one. And I understand chakras. And I've heard of I Ching, and I've never studied it, though. Like, that's really cool that it comes together.
Uh-huh.
And she popped a little link in for me. And as soon as I saw that little picture come up, I was like, this is my jam. Because once you pull it up, you see on the side, you're like, I understand these astrological signs. Like, I know what those things are. I feel kind of comfortable. And if you've been into astrology for long enough, you're like, well, I've done research. I know how to pair things up. And so I really started deep diving into that because that Leo energy that I have was like more me. I need the mirror, right? That's what they talk about Leo being prideful is I need that mirror to see myself. And in that moment I was like, well, that's not prideful. Like I really just want to know. And I want to know because it's important enough to me that I'm represented to this world in the way that I want to be. That's the calling that I really feel pulled for. And so I went through this program and I started doing the things and it didn't actually help anything because I didn't actually start to do anything with human design. Like I knew of it and I knew my things. I could answer certain questions that people wanted me to answer, but I wasn't implementing it. It's like kind of knowing these rules of law of attraction and being like, well, I said I am love and I am abundance and I'm a millionaire and I'm not. It was very much one of those energies. And so I closed down a completely viable program. Like I shut off myself from money. I stopped getting clients. I closed down an accounting firm. Like I was broke. Nothing was working out. And then there was another woman who was in this program with me and she had come in a little bit later. And so we started masterminding and, I'm a 6'2" generator in human design and she's a 6'3", and so we very much were like just this back and forth, and a lot of it was honestly bullshitting about the 6 line, right? Because with that kind of energy we were like, well, we can see everybody else, and I was like, nobody else really understands that, so we'll just complain a little bit. And talking with her interest in pulling up for it and her interest in being like, ooh, and guess what I found. And really, the trigger for me was that she knew about the lines. She knew about the energy that was transferred between things in this very geometric way, and I didn't.
Right. And
so her saying those things to me, I was like, okay, tell me more about that. Like, help me figure out this part, and I'll help you figure out that astrology part because you don't know anything about that. Right. And so I think we spent maybe 8 months or so just back and forth in this really deep dive experience of like, what's this for your 6? And does this resonate? Like if I said that and what about those energies? And so we broke a lot of things down in that way. And the biggest factor for me, I think, in doing that was not just understanding more about who I was, but then being able to apply these things. And I very much in the beginning had this focus on business, right? So I was like, how can I put that into business? And how can I speak to people? That's really what I wanted. How can I speak to people in this way that they're going to hear me? Because my entire life, I've always been like, I'm screaming and shouting. I'm exceptionally loud. I am wearing a neon colored shirt today. Like, I am loud and present and in people's faces. I have no problem taking up space. And still I was invisible. And still nobody heard me. And I was like, how much louder do I really have to be? What is it that I'm not doing? Or what am I not understanding that I haven't been able to pick up from myself, whether it's my own deconditioning or from these other things that I knew? And I'm still unpacking a lot of it, but I'm finding out so many other things about the light sides of me and these shadow sides of me, and not just the energy that everything holds, but how I'm applying it. And the really cool thing that I found in human design, kind of in the way that astrology looks at you and says, this is the energy that you're coming in with. Like cosmically, you've passed through all of this stardust and you've collected all of these bits, and this is the energy that you're placing out. Right? human design comes in and it really much says, this is the energy that you have moving inward. And it's all of these little colored bits, and everything else, that's that external portion that you're going to be impacted by. And so I felt like I had so many more layers of information that I could be like, okay, well, if that outside energy is going to do this, and this is the inside energy I have, ooh, what can I do with that moving forward? And it became this predictor tool in the way that I was going to speak with my family, in the way that I was going to approach my husband. Like, there were times where we've been together for 11 years now, and I was like, we're divorced. It's done. I just can't go on in this way anymore. And so much of it was me. So truthfully, I mean, it was me being an asshole a lot of the time. Not wanting to decondition, not wanting to look at things, not wanting to implement truths that I already knew, right? Very stubborn. It's in all of the charts. And I knew it. You know, that was the crazy thing, was I knew that I was allowing myself to be in that place, and I was not ready to not do it. You know? So then finding this system and seeing that not only did I have this concentrated energy externally, and I had this concentrated energy internally, and all of those were these varying scales, right? I was like, well, I get to pick all of it then. And it became like, where on this scale can I move this thing to?
Right.
Kind of like people look at their weight and they're like, let me move it down. I'm like, ooh, how much more can I gain in empathy? I'm not empathetic by any means. I'm really not. I really want to be. And that's the important part, is the fact that I know that and I want to do it.
Right.
I want to be compassionate and I want to be softer and I don't want to have to be as loud. You know, they say this thing about parenting, and I wish that I could be the gentle parent, but I apparently say too many F-bombs. And they're talking about, you just have to whisper. Like, I've seen so many videos recently about, I stopped yelling, and the way I really got my kids to listen was, I just had to whisper. And I remember my mom doing stuff like that, and I remember like how infuriated I would get, and I was like, I bet those kids are pissed. I bet they're so mad that you're whispering, you know?
Right.
And then I look at that and I'm like, man, that was my own conditioning. That was my own thing. And maybe if I just whisper, maybe if I just stop white knuckling life so hard and I go through, I can get to it.
Right.
You know? And it wasn't until I found that. Like, you guys, how old am I right now? I was 33. I was 33 when I found that. And my entire life, all I wanted to do was grow up. Wish away every single day so I could be that grown-up. So I could be that person that I wanted to be. And I didn't even realize that I was a kid until I was 33. Like I was a perpetual teenager that whole time. And so anyone who's listening, if you guys know me, I'm sorry that I was terrible to you. I'm sure that it's true, right? And that's one of the things I think that law of attraction also gave me, is that ability to go back and be like, I'm not the same me as I was before.
Right.
You know, sorry if I did those things to you.
Right.
Sorry if that was the experience you had and I unknowingly hurt you.
Right.
Right. And then we get to go and correct things. And we were talking before we even started about that, this concept of our karma. Right. And I was like, okay, that's one thing. I'm just taking that off the karma list.
Right.
All of these things that I'm brought back to, I'm just going to tick those off, right? It's my time to go ahead and fix that. And a lot of us, I think including you, we talk so much about breaking these generational patterns that we've been conditioned in. And this is one of those ways. And if you're going about it by using the records, right? And I'm going about it by using human design and law of attraction, what do I care how you got there? So long as you did it, like, high five, we've done this thing, because this is hard.
Right. There's so many different ways that we can, practice that self-awareness and discover ourselves. I mean, like, there's just infinite tools. Human design's a tool, astrology is a tool, Akashic record is a tool. But, it's just, what do you feel drawn to, So getting into, like, some of the types, like, me learning that I was a generator changed everything, because I was like really trying to do too many things and just pushing and like trying to force things.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, this just seems like it needs to happen. So I'm going to put everything into it. And then I would get frustrated. And that's the not self thing, which I learned.
Right.
But the more I studied being a generator, the more I realized that as long as I'm creating and I'm getting up every morning and I'm doing some kind of work, whatever it might be, it could shift, on a whim, that I'm generating and pulling everything that I need towards me.
Absolutely.
And this was like a huge light bulb for me. Because I stopped, like if things weren't flowing, I stopped trying to force. And then I started trusting the universe because I knew that I was showing up. So then, the people that like I need in my life at that moment would find me. And like with my astrology readings. So I discovered that generator thing before I kind of came out as an astrologer. And I don't advertise. I trust. And then every time I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I didn't try to cram all these things in and stress myself out this week. And like, I just say yes when it feels like yes, because generators have that quick yes or no response.
Oh, it's so good.
So like reflectors have to wait a month, or whatever. Not me. I'm like, yes, no. Yeah. And now between learning the generator thing and having the records to just sort of check, like, should I do this? They're like, yes. And I'm like, well, that's good because it felt like a yes.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of helped me validate, yes, I do feel like this is it. And now I go for it. Even if it's something that's like totally bizarre. Like the podcast started from a yes response because my friend was like, you should maybe try to podcast. And then I was like,
ooh.
I was like, I have to say yes. My body's saying yes.
Yeah.
So I followed it. And that's literally how the podcast happened. People were like, did you just think about it for years? And I was like, no, my friend just randomly told me that I'd probably be good at it. And my body was like, yes.
Yeah.
But that's the power of learning I was a generator.
Yeah.
And it's like we are everyone's manifesting, but we're doing it a little bit differently. Right. And it's just by following that gut response.
That's one of the things, like when everyone's talking about manifestation not working, if everyone can just go pull your human design chart and you can find out the things that we're going to talk about in the rest of this episode, if you can find these things in your chart, if you can take notes and you can figure out how this is operating, just like in astrology, if you know your top 3, and just like in law of attraction, if you guys just try with one, just try with breathing, grounding, and gratitude. Make that your baseline. And if that's the case, 80% of your life across the board is more aware.
Right.
80% of your life is opportunity. It's no longer challenge, it's opportunity.
Right.
It's that singular shift that you end up having. And it's insane, the things that start to come to you.
Right.
Right? Because as a generator, you also have unlimited capacity to create.
Right.
You can go all day.
Right.
Like when I was serving, all day.
I would work
it was
doubles.
mindless, right? It was so mindless. And I do that now in the work that I have too. I'm really very much on this path to the spiritual aspects, and I'm running an amazing community for that. And I'm still doing this other side work. I'm still being called out for this very analytical, structured, let's scale, let's market, let's do kind of activity, right? And I look at both of those paths and I'm like, man, I'm really good at both of those. And I do get to just say yes to everything. But I've recognized that when I'm doing this other work that I'm just naturally really, really gifted at, it's so mindless and I can do it so endlessly that it kind of allows me to play a little bit and create in this other space while still being productive.
Right.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah. And I am like a very efficient person. And I have some people in my life and they're not generators. And they're almost like jealous of me in a way because like I'm just constantly cranking out things. And it's because my mind is like always thinking, and as soon as I finish a project I immediately get like a download for the next one. Sometimes I'll take a pause still before I start it, but the idea comes almost like as soon as I complete the last thing. So the idea will come and then I'll rest and then I'll start it the next day, and it's like it just never stops for me. But not everyone operates that way. So I'm like, you shouldn't be jealous of me because like you're not a generator. Like you're not supposed to just be cranking it out nonstop. Some like manifestors need to spend more time in the mental, like thinking about it and like, really focusing on, because like it's not as immediate for them.
Right.
You know, but there's that difference with manifestors as that it's important for them to be really mindful because they will manifest things like really fast.
Instantaneously.
So I have to put work in.
Right.
But I'm still, but if I have a crappy thought, I have a little bit more time to turn it around.
Right.
But my friend's a manifestor, and that was one of the things that she told me I never thought about. And she's like, well, sometimes I accidentally manifest the bad, something I don't want because I'm not being mindful. Mm-hmm. So that's, they're working differently. But sometimes I feel jealous of manifestors because they're just like, once they have the thought, then it, where I have to put a lot of time or work into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who get into human design and they're so angry with what they find out. They're like, wow, how can I be this thing? Like, I know somebody else who's this, and I really wish I could be that. I really wish I could have that thing.
Right.
And part of it's really fun. I mean, it's fun to go and compare gates and channels and different crosses and things that you have because it gives you a different insight. And you can be like, oh, how do you perceive that? Like, how does this sound to you from your perspective, right? It really does give you a lot of leniency into being authentic and recognizing that there is literally no one else on this planet who sees how you do. Literally. Not a single person. And that's kind of a pass. You get a pass on that. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. So now that there's not that pressure, but there is still the pressure of desire for something that you don't have. And I won't say that it eases up. It hasn't eased up for me a lot in terms of like not wishing I didn't have the things that I have. I still have lots of those days. But I utilize it differently. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that like, okay, it's still the spectrum and I'm still today, just today, right now in this present moment, I'm probably not in the mental space that I'd want to be. Right. And you're allowed to sit in those and you're allowed to kind of feel bad about certain things that you have. But it pays to remember that, we're really gifted this experience because we're meant to fulfill that karmic pattern, right? We're meant to close these spiritual gaps, so to speak, that we've left open. And you don't get to lie to yourself in that. Mm-hmm. And so if I know that I have these things, well, then the best that I can do is learn how to use them.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah, now that I've went through some of the other types, when I first discovered it, they're like, yeah, generators are the majority. Mm-hmm. Of course, Aquarius rising, when I hear I'm like the majority, I'm like, what? I'm like everyone else. Yeah. But so at first I was like, well, I want to be rare, Mm-hmm. But it took me meeting all of the different types and seeing the positives and negatives of each to really be thankful that I'm a generator. Yeah. Because it really is like me. Yeah. And I enjoy working and stuff. Like, so it's like, of course, but I think before I knew about it, I would allow other people to use my energy. Mm-hmm. And so I was working a lot. Like I was doing like all this free stuff for people and I was just really drained. And it's because, I was being a generator, but I wasn't being a conscious generator. Right. And people were like taking advantage of how hard that I can work. Mm-hmm. So that really was like empowering. And then I kind of was like, well, I'm going to work for myself. Yeah. I'm not going to work for some manager that doesn't even know my last name. Right. I'm going to generate everything for me. And that's what I'm supposed to do too. If you go back to the astrology, is I'm Aquarius rising and my north node is in the first house. Nice. So like I'm literally steering more towards myself. I'm not supposed to be working for all these other people. Right. I'm supposed to be working towards my goals and like what makes me happy, But I didn't know that. Right. But I know that when I was waiting tables, I was depressed all the time. I was frustrated all the time. That's my not self theme. So now, as soon as I'm like doing something, I love it. And then there'll be a point where it's time to let it go. And I'll start getting frustrated. And I'm like, oh, yep, ding, not self theme. Right. Like it's time to move on. And then I can move on in like this positive way because I don't let it like the resentment come up. I'm like, actually, the cycle is changing. The wheel is turning. And now I'm supposed to do this thing. And then I don't stay in this crappy situation for like 10 years just because I signed up for this job. Now I have to. No. Yeah. I'm like, no, Spirit's leading me on. Yeah. But I don't know. I felt like I was totally like a victim in my own life story for so long. I wasn't the protagonist. Right. But then I'm like, well, my north node's in the house itself. I'm the protagonist of my story. But then I'm like, really, everybody kind of is, Yeah.
But I mean, that was the thing. As soon as I found that human design piece and that connected in with the astrology, it was like, oh, now I have the other part of that question, right?
Right.
I have the answer to that other piece that, like, you kind of just left that out there, friends. And it blew my mind knowing that human design was made of these 5 different elements, right? And I was like, okay, well, astrology, you guys are validated. You're in this other thing over here. Good for you. And then there's still also, there's like this energy, I think, that kind of comes in with the human design where, yeah, you know, a lot of these other key pieces that go in, and there's a lot of discernment. Okay. There's a lot of discernment that comes in with, one, being able to recognize the truths within yourself, to know where you're at kind of along that spectrum. But there's also so much information. And I think that's why it's important, kind of like with astrology, when you say, okay, I know my top 3. And I know if I know those and I understand that energy, I can kind of pinpoint when I'm moving like this. I can pinpoint how I'm being received by others with my rising sign, right? I can definitely feel when I'm too much. I have a Cancer moon, so I can definitely feel when I'm too much in the moon. It's a lot of emotion that comes in. And we have that when we look at these key elements that are part of human design and we say, okay, I know that I'm a generator.
Right.
Right. And I know that I can workhorse. And I know that what I really want to do is, yeah, I really do want to work. I love working. Right. I just want to work on the things that are important to me. Right. And so then you can go back and be like, oh, in astrology and my son's in the 12th house. And I'm like, okay, cool. My son's in the 12th house, and that's a really spiritual house. And I really do like spiritual stuff. Right. I really do like moving in that place. And my MC is in Taurus, and we just had, North Node in Taurus, and yes, like I'm really moving in this way. And so you get to have that excitement that comes in of like, I've done the thing. I've done a really good job, right? And I have that other piece of information. Because so many of us are moving through this life and we're begging just to be like, hey, universe, can I get on the same page as you for a minute? And it's here. Like, the information is already out here for you guys to come and get on that page. You just have to find it. Right. And so I'm glad you guys found the Astral Hour because, like, here you go.
Right. Yeah. I watched this episode of Open Minds on Gaia, and it was on human design. And something I really noticed that she focused on is that astrology is this like Piscean age thing. Like, it still has all this Piscean energy, but we're moving into Aquarius. Right. And so human design takes astrology and it evolves it and adds different components. But, as we evolve and move forward, we kind of need to make adjustments and things like that. So with my readings, I pull from a lot of different things. Right. Like, I've studied Jungian astrology. I've studied different ways of reading the chart. I read Vedic astrology books. I read modern. I read ancient astrology books. And I do think that, and I study a little bit of human design. So I've kind of just like mold it all together, right? And I use the Akashic and things. So I feel like my readings are kind of more future based. Right. But that's my Aquarius North Node, and I have Venus and Mars there. So I'm just naturally doing that. I'm evolving with it. But human design it has helped me a lot. But I'm not like you to where I'm like really great at doing it for others. I help people. I'm like, go look up your aura type. Right. And then the cross and things like that will help, because for me, my cross is at the vessel of love, but I'm the 3-5, so I'm the heretic martyr. Well, this helped. Boom, heretic, you know, because I'm a heretic because I'm like so open-minded that basically, like, in every religion, they're like, blasphemy, you know, because I'm like, but you guys are all like the same thing. And like that is kind of a heresy, but it's a good heresy because that is how like we evolve, by asking those questions and by like bringing up that stuff that no one wants to talk about and things like that. But like finding out that I was a heretic, I mean, that just changed everything.
You're that gray area of it's not toxic positivity. We just looked at the other side of the coin. Like, that's just a common sense thing, guys. Right. It's so funny to watch how like you can find tangible representations of who you are. Right. Happens.
Right. And then like embrace it, you know?
Yeah.
Like in Vedic, I had a Vedic astrologer look at my chart and she summed it up as, you're an outcast. I'm like, of course. But most people don't, that might like bum them out. But like, I'm like, of course I'm out,
Yeah.
So like it just makes sense. But it makes me feel a little bit better when I'm feeling excluded from things and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's not personal. Like this person did not invite me because of a personal, it's actually because I'm an outcast. So,
Right.
I have to kind of embrace that. And if I want to get out there, I'm going to have to make that choice myself. I'm going to have to put the effort in.
I'm going to have to respond like a generator.
Right. I'm going to have to respond. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, yeah. Could you go into some of the types? We've talked a bit about generators, but we haven't really brought up like projectors or.
Yeah. So I wrote down some statistics or some little facts that I think will help everybody. So you know how astrology uses elements basically to showcase that charge of energy for each archetype. I'm a Leo. I am very fiery. I'm super passionate, right? Yes, I think all of that fits.
Right.
Human design does the exact same thing. So they bring in strategy, and we're referring to that as part of our type. The other part is that I'm a 6-2 generator, right? So the 6-2 is the lines, and those are your archetypes.
Right.
So it's very much that same energy of this is the element that's coming in to kind of shine the light on or kind of illuminate you a little bit based on this character that you are, this costume that you wear. You'll hear a lot of people in human design talk about your costume.
Right.
The strategy basically in human design is this method that connects your unique energy, this field of your unique energy, to this life force, right? And you guys know all of that as being an aura. The aura is not necessarily your own little field. Yes, it's your field also, but it's also this energy field, which is about 6 feet, spacing in 6 feet around us. And it is the magnet that's drawing our experiences, right? And it's not just our perception that's being pushed out in our auras, because they will say, especially people who read auras, there will be this discussion of like, okay, well, you're out of alignment, and because you're out of alignment, we really can't tell what your aura is, right? So depending on your vibrational frequency, that's law of attraction, by the way, depending on that is dependent on how likely you are to be able to project and receive these experiences, right? And that's why it's so important that we merge these things together. And so if that's your magnet and that's your attractor that's bringing everything to you, then the whole purpose is to become your most authentic self, right? And so we think that we have these elements as in earth, water, fire, and air. Yes. And energy. And so human design becomes that additional energy type of saying, okay, and energy.
Right.
You guys forgot that. It's all of this and this last part. And
Right,
so,
like the ether.
yeah. And so, I mean, I think that's also why a lot of us really felt complete in that moment of being like, oh, now it's come together, because we were only given a piece of that puzzle and it made complete sense. And we were like, yeah, that's pretty good.
Right.
But, right? And so now we're given this other point. So if those are our elements, basically, then we have these 5 different strategy types. And you'll notice we have the 5 energies. We have 5 different energy types. We have the 7 chakra points, right? 9 in human design, because human design has broken those down a little bit further. We have 64 hexagrams. So things really start to break down in this mathematical pattern. And the accountant in me loves that the language of the universe is math. Like,
right.
Haha, told you guys. Like, it's the one thing you all needed. But these strategies, right? These strategies, they operate using different centers or different chakras. They each operate and are used for different transcension needs. Like, the needs of a reflector are not ever going to be the needs of a generator. Can't be. They just can't be, right? And they each have their own ways of expressing themselves. They each have their own ways of being able to interpret self. And that alone, that perspective alone, that there are so many variations, that out of 8 billion people, you are the only you. Dr. Seuss was the one who had that right, right? You are the only you. And all of this is so that you can attract that bliss that you want. So you have the manifestors and the generators. Those are the ones that the majority of people know. And then if they had a baby, you have the manifesting generators, right? And manifesting generators and generators are what make up that 70%.
Right.
Right? And so for manifestors, they make up about 8% of the population. Some people will vary that number a little bit. We're just going to throw it out there. This is what they said in human design.
Right.
So 8% of the population, and those people are here to create. They're here to have the ideas. They're very Aries in that first house energy, right? Of like, we're initiating. I had it. Let's go. Right. They don't think things through very often. They're not thinking about consequences. They're just thinking about leaping, and we'll figure it out later. And that is energy that we need. That energy of spontaneous birth, of spontaneous creation. That's what our universe was founded on. Right? You guys can't not have that energy. So 8% of these people, that's fantastic. They're these initiators of action. And so these thoughts and these ideas that are budding and bubbling up under the surface is what's allowing a generator to work. It's kind of like when we take bees out of the habitat and we're all going to starve to death because there's no pollinators. If we don't have a manifester, what good is it being a flower?
Right.
You know? That's no fun. Manifestors also work with the center of their throat being connected to a motor, right? That is a solar plexus, a heart, or the root center. So they have this full connection, this full circuitry that starts to work together, and that's why they get instant manifestation. Constant energy moving through chakra points, right? And so you can tell, for them at least, when they're not in this place of feeling good, being good, and having things that they want, they're angry. A lot of these people have anger issues. I wouldn't say like compulsively or anything, but they fly off the handle a little bit more easily than the rest of us. They practice road rage a little bit more easily than the rest of us, right? Generators are steady. We're worker bees. We're not made to just explode at people. We're not made to spontaneously erupt like a manifestor is. So of course we're not going to have those same things. Their auras, though, for a manifestor, the reason they are this way is because their auras, think of like a little black box in an airplane, right? Their auras are so closed. They're so guarded. No one's going to see what's on this black box. That's because they need this creation to be able to spark it, right? They are a personal destiny. They are this personal fate that's moving forward. And when they're feeling good, they're at peace. This concept that we have about this is the life that I want to live, this very ultimately joyous and peaceful abundance is what I'm hoping for. That's manifestor energy. That's this initiation of desire. And it makes sense that all of us kind of hold that sense of freedom if that's the way that the universe was created, right? Of course, we would be hungry for growth and prosperity and abundance and all of these great things because that's what we were designed for. And then you have these generators and manifesting generators. We kind of lump those together. And they're that 70% of population. We're meant to sustain it. We are life force.
Right.
Right? So think about manifestors kind of like being Father Time. Yeah? And then you have Mother Nature.
Right.
As this manifesting generator, this generator kind of energy. And we're constantly budding and we're constantly rebuilding. Right? We are builders. We're workers. And that's why we're waiting to respond, because how do you know what to build if you don't have any blueprints?
Right.
Right? So generators, we're here for mastery. We're here to become the masters of our craft. We're here to showcase what it really means to be this upper echelon of morals and values and what that pure love and joy really is. So if we can show you guys how to build it, if we can show you guys how to master this, if we can show you what it really means to steadfast in these desires that you have, we know that you can create it because it's already been initiated. Right. We know it. And let us help you guys get there, right? Generators work from the sacral. We work from the sacral. And there are two different kinds of generators. And I'm not talking about the this manifesting generator, but there's two kinds. You have a pure generator. And then you have different lines that now become a manifesting generator, right? So a pure generator, they don't have a throat connection to anything, right?
Me.
And that's me too. Yeah. And I can tell you, it's a really fun energy to have. I have defined throat chakra. It doesn't mean that I can't speak and I can't express. It just means that I'm not manifesting as quickly, right? We're a little bit slower than a manifester. So if you see that hierarchy of like a manifester is sitting here and it feels almost spontaneous because sometimes they can't even tell that they're processing that quickly, right? So it feels very overnight. We would call it overnight success. And then you have a manifesting generator as a step down, right? They're manifesting more quickly than us generators are, but not as quickly as that manifester. And then you have us. And so it's this really nice progression of kind of like the generators are almost gatekeepers, right? And so we're looking at projectors and we're looking at the rest of the generators who aren't there, which is a lot of you guys. And we're not really looking at reflectors because they don't count, but we're saying, hey, you guys, like, if you can get to this point right here, you're going to skyrocket, right? Because manifesting generators are going to be able to show you this portion, and manifestors are showing you that creation. And like all of us coupled together, we're this really great community. Like, come on over into human design and join us, right? And for a generator, not a mani-gen, but for a generator by themselves, like you said, we're frustrated. I was so frustrated with everything in life. I was frustrated by being a parent. I was frustrated by being divorced. I was frustrated by, I'm married to a recovering addict, right? I was frustrated by this life that I was given. And what I thought I was looking for was peace, right? I had this concept of, I'm looking for joy. I'm looking for this unwavering bliss. And really, as a generator, I'm just looking to be satisfied.
Right.
Make me content for a day. I am good.
Right.
And that's so true. Like once I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, it's not really peace. I just like, let me just take a breath for a minute. It was one of those kinds of feelings. And I was like, oh, that feels good.
Right.
That's all I want. I just breathe. Just breathe. Right. It's what I said earlier. You just have to breathe. Now a manifesting generator has all of the power, all of the things as a generator. They manifest a little bit more quickly. That's the only trait that Daddy gave them. And then they're pulling both of the themes from both. So they can be peaceful or content. They can be angry or frustrated. And so when you look at that and you're like, man, 70% of the population, let's put manifestors in there, 78% of the population.
Right.
How many people are angry? How many people are frustrated? Like, holy shit, that's so many people.
Right.
That is crazy to think about. So you got the black box people, and then you have generators and manifesting generators, right? So we got black box, closed and repelling. Their entire job is to push you away. They're freedom seekers. They don't want to be tied down. They're like the free ballers. They're not going to put the underwear on, Mom. It's not going to happen. And then you have the rest of us over here, and we're driving that force, and our aura is so enveloping and we're so inviting, right? How many people come to you and like they'll talk to you about nothing?
A lot.
All the time.
And then they'll be like, now she knows all my secrets.
Yeah.
I must push her away because she knows too much.
Right. Must make her invisible. Gosh, I have that same thing. And then you have the last two, right? And these are so rare. It's so hard to come across them. So you have projectors, and they make up a pretty decent portion, right? 22% of the population. And the thing about projectors is they have to be invited.
Right.
Right? So I might have to wait to respond. Someone can come and be like, Kate, I really want you to do this thing. And I'm like, I'd rather not. Projectors are like, can I please, dear Lord, tell you the things? And the whole world is like pushing them away. And they're like, you're not invited. I don't want to hear your stuff. Like my dad's a projector and he's a Pisces. He's a Pisces projector. And I mean, quite frankly, at his age now, he just doesn't care. He'll just talk and tell you and take it or don't, you know? But there were so many points where I had asked him about business stuff and I was like, man, did people like listen to you? Did you get invited to the cool kids table? And he was like, no. I basically just had to do what I want when I wanted. And I was like, that's not your human design. How did that work? Right? And like, I became so curious after finding these things out. But projectors are here to manage and guide. They're literally here to say, I'm going to utilize this energy of yours, generators. And then because you're responding and you're asking me questions because I'm here to guide you, well, you're inviting me nonstop. Right? And so, okay, cool. We're your teachers. We're your philosophers. We're this trained staff that's meant to kind of help guide you through that. And so their aura is so penetrating, right? It's like a little ice cream cone, and it's poking out at everybody being like, can you invite me in? Can you invite me in? Right? Just knocking on the door.
Right.
And they don't have a defined sacral. They don't have a throat connection to the solar plexus or the root or the heart. And because they're needing to be invited, there are 5 different types of projectors, right? We have the emotional authority, we have ego projectors, splenic, all of those things. When you guys go pull your chart, projectors they're fun and not fun. Right. Like, to learn that you're a projector, that's kind of a hard one that people really get frustrated with getting, because it's not how you expected to go through life. And then you make sense of all the things and you're like, what? I look in the online space and I'm like, okay, if 70% of people are generators, that means the majority of the world was raised or conditioned in some way to operate as a generator. So a lot of people kind of know how to work through that, even if it's not the best for them. And so I think like projectors very easily can come and pick out those bits. And at the same time, they want to be heard so badly that like they're forcing it, right? And so I look at that and I'm like, well, if you guys were trained to respond, it makes sense that you want to get out and you want to comment on these things. And so I try really hard, at least in the online space, to go to everybody and just engage. I ask everybody a question. Right. I will invite all of you to the table, just because I don't know who's who, right? It's not like everyone went to go pull their human design. And so I really try to leave that door open of like, you can either respond to this because I asked you a question, or now I'm inviting you to tell me more. And that kind of gives you a different leeway. And that was a game changer for me, because I didn't recognize, and it's so hard to recognize sometimes, a lot of the themes that come with these energies that are not yours, right? So like for a projector, their not self is bitter. How easy is it for you to tell whether someone's bitter or not, or just having a bad day? You know what I mean?
Right.
And then for projectors, when they're in the positive, they are successful.
Right.
The moment I heard that, I was like, I wish I was a projector. I'd be successful and not invisible, right?
Right.
And then we have reflectors. The last one's reflectors, and they have 0 authority. No aura. None. How harsh is that? Like, how many of you have ever tried to have an aura reading, and they're like, we see nothing? Like, you might be a reflector, or you could just be really low. You know, in the emotional intelligence.
Super rare. But I know 2.
Ooh.
And one of them is like super aware that they're a reflector. And the other one, I've showed that they're a reflector, but they don't keep up with the transits. They're not aware of the fact that they're reflecting all of this. And so what I'll notice is that when we have like some of these retrogrades and things like that, these 2 people are getting drilled.
Oh, yeah.
And they're, like the one that's really aware, though, he'll dial back.
Right.
And he's like, okay, everything's in retrograde. I don't need to try to sell my house right now or try to, he's not trying to manifest anything during those times or start relationships and things. Like, he's really mindful. And I love it because it's helped me be more aware of like how a reflector, in order to really hone in on the power, you got to be more mindful as a reflector. And then there's that 30-day cycle. But like, if you don't know you're a reflector, I feel like that one can be really tough.
That one I feel like is definitely where we get a lot of that trauma that kind of comes in. And not a lot of people are willing to stand in and say that, right? With law of attraction and stuff, I always believe that we're sitting here and we're calling in these things that are for us. And then you hear people who are reflectors. And if you listen to a lot of stories they have, you look at that and you're like, how could you ever ask for those things, And all of us have gone through dark, terrible, terrible things, right? But for reflectors, these people make up 2% of the population. Like, that is an insanely low amount of people who are reflectors. And they're here to tell the truth.
Right.
And the truth is scary. And it's painful for a lot of people. And so if you could imagine having no other option but to be so truthful that it is painful for everybody else.
Right.
And especially as a kid, right? Like, especially as someone who is mirroring all of the negatives of somebody else, absorbing that and amplifying it,
reflecting
right?
it back out.
That's how they do it. They have to absorb it. They amplify it within themselves to the point where we're gaining the deconditioning from it. That's the whole point, is we have to be able to respond, especially as generators, but like even as manifestors, they have to be able to be reflected of and shown what this is going to look like. And that is so painful for so many people. Like, I think about reflectors overall, and my heart almost breaks for them, just in general, because to live that way, it's such a gift if you're aware of it.
Right.
And it's so detrimental if you're not, you know.
And they need us. So the reflectors are a gift because they're I feel like they're kind of channeling a lot. But if they don't realize they're channeling it, they might think, "Oh, wow, I'm crazy. My life's..."
Right.
But if their community can say, "Oh, this is our reflector. This is our gift." But we have to help them because they are just reflecting. So we have to help them create and be there, like, to offer some advice and hold space, because like they're just receiving all the information.
Yep.
Like almost in a delay or something like that. I don't know how else to explain it, but
that was a great explanation. Yeah, that 28-day wait is very much, it's the practice of patience, right? That delay of is this really going to be the right reflection to give back to you? And, you know, their aura. So you have this open, huggable little bear as a generator, and then you have the black box airplane as a manifester, and you have the ice cream cone poking people. And then you have reflectors, and their job is to resist. Their job is to be hesitant with information that they're going to absorb. And as they're absorbing it, right, it's kind of like you get your little chocolate box, or what is the chocolate? Not Welch's, but, you know, the little gold chocolate box.
Is it Wellmans?
Oh, yeah, Wellmans.
Maybe.
I think.
I don't know. I don't eat.
Either way, you guys know the gold box. You all have been to Walmart. You get that, and they're sampling these little bits. Right? And so if you're sampling enough to be able to get an entire little piece of chocolate over here, then you have to have that cycle. And it's probably infuriating. I mean, I don't like waiting for anything, and I am slow and steady pure generator. So, I mean, I couldn't imagine having to actually wait that 28-day cycle. But for a reflector, so reflectors know that when they are out of alignment, when they're not living in this way that they're supposed to, when they're not waiting that cycle, they face disappointment.
Right.
Oh, it didn't work out for me. Right? And disappointment, we all know, spirals into that pity party 100% of the time. Right? It spirals into depression. It spirals into all of these negative ends on this emotional guidance scale. And for a reflector, when they're doing good, they're surprised. Could you imagine that being your life? I'm either surprised or disappointed. Like, where does peace filter in that? Right? It has to only come from the manifester. They have to be able to reflect what peace looks like. You know, they have to be able to reflect what steady looks like in a generator and actually feel that, which means that on our side, we have to be the best that we can be so that they can be the best that they can be.
Right. And that's where we all come together.
Right.
All of our auras merge, and we each have like the missing piece that so reflectors have, information and things that I don't have, but I have that generating ability to be sort of the foundation for them. Yep. So like we work together in harmony, and once we realize, okay, this aura is like, poking me, and then we're like, okay, I'm a little annoyed, but why am I annoyed?
Right.
And then we can have a little bit more, give people more grace.
Yeah.
And, really get to know them in a deeper way and help them get to know themselves.
Absolutely.
And give them like that space inside society,
I want to note there's only one other type that has no authority, which is no aura, right? So you have reflectors with no aura, and then you have mental projectors, and they also have no aura. And so they very much, if we're looking at it in terms of this hierarchy, they're kind of like that level up between projector and reflector, right? Kind of like how you have that manifesting generator. And so you can kind of look at these different variations, and you can say, oh man, like I am a mental projector, and I could understand because I know someone who's a reflector, right? Or I have a family member who's like that. Like I can sympathize with you. We need those little bridges that are going to pin us into other areas for other people so that we can have that collective, right? And then you think about everyone coming together in collective consciousness. You think about this universal law of one. It's the very first universal truth. We're all connected to anything and everything, all of us. And you see this really beautiful story of like, we thought we were failing this whole time. Like as a society, as just a species on this weird floating rock out in the middle of the earth. How many times have you seen that meme of like aliens drive by and we're the ghetto? Earth is the ghetto, right? Like we're doing it. We're getting to this point that we're supposed to be at, and we're creating this reality for everybody because we're all vibrating in this way. And like, that's a really cool thing to know, even if you're a reflector, right? And even if you're this projector. And I think the more that we come together and we recognize that, kind of like how you said, okay, as a reflector, you're here to give me those details that I can't see, right? You're the extra peripheral over here. And so you're going to feed that to me, and I'm going to help you feel safe. Right? Any work that you can't do, any sustainability that you can't hold for yourself, I'm going to mimic what steady looks like. I'm going to mimic what security and safety looks like. Like you feel super safe. To me, as a human being, like I look at you and I'm like, yeah, I feel good about you. You know, and I hope that like as a generator, I give that off to other people. And I hope that people who are reflectors sit here and they're like, I really enjoy showing you these pieces of yourself that you didn't even know were there. Because how beautiful is that? And the more we can do that, then the better prepared we get to live out these purposes that we're here for. Karmic or otherwise, these purposes that we're here for.
I think it's so interesting because I'm just sitting here thinking about you saying you have Leo sun in the 12th and you're sitting here talking about the collective unconscious and like showing everybody, like, so it's the sun, so you're like lighting it up, and then the sun rules Leo, so it's super happy there, you know, like, but it's in a house that a lot of people can't see. It's like a hidden house, but you're the sun, so you're like literally like, here we go, this is how it all interconnects. And that's so beautiful. I don't know if I've actually met anyone with that placement before, so that's so right? Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
like once you figure that placement out, because it would be hard because it's hidden,
right?
But once you figure it out and you can actually access it and shine there,
right?
That's what you're doing.
I have Leo rising too at the 29th degree.
Okay.
And so, you know, I think I very much needed to have that, especially because of the 12th house, to come in and say, hey, look, we really are on this trajectory. I'm also a 6-2. I'm a upper echelon, the 6. There's only 6 lines in human design. I'm a top tier kind of observer, basically, of this life, of all of these transcendent types of things, right? Like a Pisces at the very end of this wheel. And all of that kind of merging together. And like I said, there's so many nuances in human design. Like my sun gate as a Leo, I'm in gate 56. I'm the gate of the storyteller, right? So I have this wandering heart, and I have a lot of things that are in human design that are like, well, you have structures and you have patterning and you have details, and like my Mercury in there is to express in this way for the collective to understand and give these details, right? And so like I look at those things and I'm like, okay, yes, 12th house, very private, very hidden, secretive and mysterious.
But with the sun there.
And with the sun there,
but
now
you're
I'm
shining it, though.
Right?
Yeah.
And I have to tell you guys a story of how those kind of intertwine and be like, do you not see this? There's a cosmic layer and there's this universal layer and there's like a you layer, and you got to sandwich those things, right? And I fought that for so long. Like I had told you, in going through this journey, I fought that because no one wanted to listen. And there's that aspect of being a generator where life is broken down into 3 parts. And in this first part, as a 6 line in human design, they mimic every other line as they go through this transition, right? And so I looked at that and I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. That makes sense that I couldn't identify those parts. And that makes sense why I'm frustrated that I wasn't the role model, which is the archetype of a 6 line, right? When my mom was a role model, my mom's also a 6-2, right? So I got this really nice mirror of this is what it's going to be. You can be this or not be it. And then that frustration, very generator, of not being that, because I had to go through all of these things. And like recognizing that was the point that I realized I was still the perpetual teenager. Right? That was the point that I was like, oh, I just want to grow up. Please. Please. I just want to live my purpose. Like, I just want to do this thing that's mine. I just want to, like, I was throwing this tantrum. It was so crazy, and it made so much sense, and I could offer myself so much grace.
Right.
It was phenomenal.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Could you just briefly go into some of the incarnation cross part of human design and why this particular part is important?
Yeah. So, okay, we're going in this theme of 3, right? So we have our universal law and our cosmic law and our personal law, and then we have these elements that are coming in inside of like showcasing the change of that energy for archetypes, right? And so we also still in incarnation crosses. If you can use your top 3 in astrology, if you can use law of attraction and other modalities together, right? Definitely learn about yourself in human design. Find the other third one, that's for you. Pair all of those together. Your incarnation cross is kind of like one of the other portions of that 70%. So you have your North Node in astrology, and that's your life purpose, right? Very broad overviews. Not once has anyone's reading ever been like, you're going to be the teacher of this thing. The only one. No, like I think we go and we find those parts for ourselves. But the incarnation cross now becomes that purpose that you're going to kind of have this broad overview for. And it gives us a deeper clarification into the defined purpose on Earth. So it's basically the what and the how of what you're meant to do.
Right.
Right? Not dictating for you, because you always have that free will, but at the same time, there are 192 basic variations of life purpose based on human design, of these incarnation crosses. And these are all based, and they're derived from your sun and earth placements. And inside of human design, we have conscious and unconscious, right?
Okay.
And so those are the top 4 portions. When you guys are looking at your human design charts, there's 2 in red and there's 2 in black. And so it's these top 4. And that makes up this variation that is slowly going to emerge over time. Like, I've known so many people in my life who felt like, no, they're like little Doogie Housers. They're going to go on and they're going to, nobody knows Doogie Howser anymore. Why did I even say that? Like, you know, these little prodigies. This kid who can go and, the Russian kid who was like the super ninja warrior at 2 years old, and you have these piano prodigies, and like, yeah, some people come in like that. The majority of us don't, and a lot of it is going to evolve over time, where you're stepping into this version of, this is who I am and this is what I'm meant for, and you're expanding. And for all of us, we will eventually hit that point by 42 at the latest. Right? How many of us have heard about midlife crises? How many of us have heard about, like, men don't grow up until they're 50? Granny's told us all of that stuff, right? Well, that's why that thing occurs. Your life purpose, your distinguished proponent of what it's going to be a part of this world doesn't occur until then. So you're allowed to feel like the perpetual teenager until 42. You're allowed to not have it figured out. You're allowed to be worried and concerned about, like, am I not catching up with everybody else, kind of. Have you heard that saying, we all have our cross to bear?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where we get it from. Well, this is where I'm going to say we get it from. I know it didn't come from human design, but we all have this unique cross to bear for us. And it will not show up if you're not living in alignment. It will not show up. You will not achieve purpose. I need that to be very, very clear. This is not like, let me poke at you and be like, you're not doing a good job. But I'm telling you, if you're not willing to do the work, you're not going to get the reward. There are no participation trophies for life. It does not work that way. You get to be here. You get to experience. You get to have the opportunity to make things go the way you want it to go with the least amount of harm. But it's not guaranteed for you. And so your incarnation cross can only be fulfilled if you're going to be doing this work. If you're not, that's cool. That's okay. But your incarnation cross now becomes this not necessarily narrowly defined purpose, but that what and that how, right? It's also been said that this is made up of 70% of the karma or inherent energy that you're bringing into this world. So that's the key reason why it's so important for us to focus on that, kind of like your rising sign. If we say, hey, your costume, your little character type, my 6'2", is me being a Leo. And then I have this fire energy because I'm a Leo, and that's me being a generator, right? I'm a life force fire. And then I have this incarnation cross, and my incarnation cross is the left angle cross of distraction. You all are welcome. That's what I'm here for.
Right.
This cross of distraction now would become our rising sign.
Right.
Right? And so again, 70%, 70%, 70%. Your body is made up of 70% water. Like, there's no coincidence in all of these things kind of matching up, right? So a good example of how you would start to read these, kind of like I say, I'm a Leo sun, Cancer moon, Leo rising, right? I am a 6'2", pure generator with a left angle cross of destruction. That means that my costume is a role model hermit. I'm made to figure out what those mean for me. I have to know how I interact. The hermit is very much my moon sign, right? I'm very in the shell. My 6 is a role model. I'm very much in the sun and out and alive and willing to share all of the things with all of the people. I do have that open and enveloping aura, definitely made to call people in. And I'm made to do that and bring in this distraction. I'm made to break the cycle, to stop a train of thought, positive or negative. Doesn't matter. Is it used incorrectly? Absolutely. I distract myself all the time. I distract other people all the time. If we're friends, you guys get messaged a lot. Like, I don't get a lot of work done because of it. Luckily, I decided to make that my work, right? Like, we have these ways of going about things that are going to work out for us. And if I know that my job is to be a distraction, and Richard Rudd and Ra, the creator of human design, they say, okay, well, this cross of distraction is what we would give a comedian, right? It's their job to break that cycle and say, you guys can just be present for a moment. You can just sit here in the now, and all of it gets to be okay. And there's some truth that's going to come out, and you guys really aren't going to like that, right? Because it's the thing you don't want to say, or because it pokes something at you that makes you feel vulnerable. And then I can say, but I'm a generator. Like, I can scoop you up and love you and envelop you, and that's perfectly fine. And knowing those things, and knowing that I have this fire energy, and knowing that I'm illuminating this 12th house, and I'm bringing in all of these things, like, I tick off these boxes of what I want my life to look like. And not once did I ever think, when I just looked at law of attraction and I just looked at astrology, that I was going to be able to do that.
Right.
Like, having human design come in, I was like, I'm doing the things. And as a generator, you know, I'm sure you were really disappointed when you found out about the 3 stages. That was the worst part of being a generator for me, of being like, I have to wait till I'm 50 to have anything worthwhile in this life. Like, I was so frustrated. I was frustrated by it. That's really always the word. And then I recognize that I'm checking these things off. And I recognize that we're in this forward motion of rapid collective ascension, right? And then I said, okay, well, maybe I chose to incarnate at this time where time is really condensed down, and we're all doing that because I don't have to wait till I'm 50, because I don't have to go and play in that. And I've made this agreement to go and help people ascend, right? That's why I have my stuff in the 12th house. That's why I'm this storyteller. That's why I am fascinated. Like, I'm fascinated with human beings and their stories and the intricacies and private moments that you don't want to share with other people. That's so 12th house, right?
Oh, yeah.
All the things you don't want to share with anybody else. Like, come and tell them to me and let it be okay.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be something that people have to carry around anymore. And the moment that you're understanding that you have these pillars basically that are in your life, I know my sun, I know my moon, I know my rising. Cool. Pair those up with your cross, your incarnation cross in human design, your strategy, and this authority that you have moving forward. And watch as your entire life changes. So if you can breathe, ground, and find gratitude, and you're gaining the awareness from all of these other things, like, imagine your life for just a minute. with just those things.
Right.
Like you don't even have to know your Mercury and how you communicate. And you don't have to know where Venus is at and if maybe the transit's going to cause you to maybe want to divorce your husband tomorrow. Like, you can figure that out tomorrow. But if you know these, then you know how you're interacting with the world. And you know how the world's interacting back with you. And that's why these are so important across all of the modalities. If you can find those interactions, how I'm interacting with the world and how the world is interacting with me, 70% of your battle.
Right.
That's the best part.
I don't think I even realized that the incarnation cross thing was accessed later, but it makes sense. Like with North Node being more after like Saturn return, you're going to have a little bit more access.
Right.
It's an energy that you're moving towards, so it's unfamiliar.
Right.
So I didn't think about it, you know, but when I was younger, you know, because of trauma and just like crappy situations, I didn't really like love everybody. You know, I wanted to love everybody, but really I was like, you guys are really effed up. Like, and I was kind of judgmental, you know, and, but I didn't think about, you know, that these polarities. So if I'm moving towards love, I might have had to go through hate.
Yeah.
So that I could get to that incarnation.
That was my 12-year cycle too, was utterly loathing.
Yeah.
My ex-husband. Like it was, and I had always said during that time, like I didn't even think about it till just now, but I was like, I don't hate anybody in this world except for that one person. Like it was so drastic on the opposite end of that.
Right.
And it didn't even dawn on me till you said that I had to go through that.
Right.
Like I knew that I did, but I didn't know it in that sense.
Right. Right. All right. So could you just briefly kind of go into what a coaching session with you is like and what's some of your favorite parts about this work?
Yeah. So working with me is a unique combination of mindset, manifestation, and efficiency. I'm a life immersion and efficiency expert is what I tell people, which basically just means I work with people's life and business development. So I'm uniquely, intuitively blending select modalities, whether that's somebody who wants to use human design or they want to use astrology. And then we're using those things to create a dream life. So there's really no two experiences that have been the same yet that I've come into contact with. And I really have to owe that credit to my amazing clients because not only are they standing firm in what their desires are, but they're standing firm in being the adventurers and the visionaries of creating that. And so it's a lot of excitement that I get to explore and adventure into those different types of things and to showcase what that means to lead by example for them, right? Because I'm doing things that are completely new to me at the same time, right? One of the things that I love about doing this work and having clients that are coming in and they're gifting me this unique experience about not having things be similar or linear in order to know how to move through them, is the fact that I have this privilege of helping business owners expand marketing or sales efforts. I've helped people double revenue, gain more clients, close international sales, optimize client experiences. And at the same time, I've also helped people mend relationships, leave toxic relationships. I was working with clients when they got pregnant, when they've sold their house, when they've bought new houses. I've helped them fall deeper in love with partners and lose weight. And it's so many different unique things that come from this expression of being authentically you that I can't even pinpoint anything more joyous than just the fact that I get to experience all of those things about people, you know?
Right. Watch them rise into that.
Yeah, not only that, but hear the stories of it.
Right.
Like I had said, you know, as this wandering storyteller, a lot of the things that come with that in human design as a sun gate, they kind of mimic this bard type of energy, right? This casual historian type of energy. And when you can capture the essence of what that really means for someone to go through that experience, it's everything. It's everything. Almost like I would assume a reflector showing back the best parts of you. Like it feels so whole and so complete. And just knowing that I get to share my gifts and my talents and these things that I love with other people, that is the best part of this work that I do, because I'm not doing the work for them. I'm sitting here as a 6'2" and as this generator and saying, hey, look, if it's for a business, I can help you guys set up systems. We can walk through what your SOPs are. We can look at your marketing strategy, right? We'll write things out. We'll make a spreadsheet. Generators are great at spreadsheets, right? I'll send you a spreadsheet. And then on the personal development side, we're sitting here and we're saying, is this you? Does that feel good?
Right.
And if it doesn't feel good, why are you doing it? Right? And there's so much peace that comes with that. And getting to know other people through that that's been the best thing, I think, that has probably ever happened in my life. And I mean, there's been a lot of great things.
Right. All right. What's the best way for our listeners to follow you or book a session with you?
Yeah. I hope all of you guys want to get in contact and tell me all of your stories. Get onto my page. You guys can actually find me, all of my calendar links, all of the events or opportunities to work with me in any capacity. You guys can find on my personal Facebook page. That is at Kate Sacred Solidity. That's my business name, Sacred Solidity. And I share everything on that page. Love it, hate it, take it, use it, whatever you guys want to do. That's also where all of the updates are. So anything that you guys will find will be located there.
All right, great. And I'll add the links and stuff in the description for the episode. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been so great. Thank you so much
I've
for
had such a good time.
coming and chatting with me. I really appreciate your work, and
Thank you.
I love that I get a chance to help share it with others. So.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope that this has been impactful and beneficial for your audience. And remember, it's not just me and it's not just you, but it's everybody that we know and come in contact with. So I hope that you guys can take that out as audience members and share that in your world also, so we can all just better connect.
Yeah. I love that. So, well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.